Howdy, folks. Greyhawk 4x4 coming at you again, your resident vintage gamer. And I know it's been a couple of days since I made a video. There's a big reason for that. There's a lot of reasons for that stuff that went on. I will go over that next time I do a live. I'll go through the whole thing of what my last week has been like. It's quite entertaining. Anyway, so what I wanted to do in this two-part series that I'm doing now is I'm going to do, we're going to go over the history of gaming magazines, publications, and it's quite involved. So we're going to break this up into two parts. Today we're going to do all of the tabletop stuff, tabletop wargaming, role-playing games, you name it, board game, publication, whatever, that I have knowledge of. We're going to go through that. And then part two will be all the video game stuff. Magazines about video gaming from all the way back to probably the early 80s. So anyway, but for the tabletop stuff, it goes way back. So the very first thing that I can find, gaming magazine-wise, that was ever published, as far as I can tell, is by the company Avalon Hill, and they produced, I don't have one of these, they produced something called the General. This one is dated 1964. This is just a screenshot that I printed out. And it's all about tabletop wargaming. And this is the company. They made games like this. They made what they call bookcase games, right there. Avalon Hill is the name of the company, right there. And they made a ton of these. But they were mainly known for their wargaming stuff, like Panzer Leader, Squad Leader, Panzer Blitz, all those types of things, which is what this publication would have mainly been all about. Then, just a little bit later, Gary Gygax, one of the guys who invented Dungeons and Dragons, he had a group called the International Federation of Wargaming, and they had a publication called International Wargamer. And this right here, this Don't Give Up the Ship, by Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax, the same two people who created Dungeons and Dragons, that actually became a game in itself. They actually published that, called Don't Give Up the Ship, as a separate pamphlet. That later became, a thing. So, but this initially was called the Spartan. And as far as I can tell, that started sometime around 1968. So you've got, as far as I can go back, 64, then 68, then it turned into International Wargamer. And then, right around 1970, you had something called the Doomsday Book. Now, if you notice how it's spelled, it looks like it would be pronounced a Domesday Book. However, I did a little research, and that is the spelling at the time in medieval England for Doomsday. That's how they spelled it. And what a Doomsday Book was back then in medieval England was a record of everything that went on, all the wars, property changing hands as a result of wars, all that type of stuff. But that was historical. I mean, that was factual. But they decided to name their little magazine the Doomsday Book, spelled the same way as Domesday. And you notice there's a watermark on this one from this screenshot, playingattheworld.com, because these are so rare. There was only 13 issues of them made. They were all hand-typed on a typewriter and then Xeroxed. And these are so rare that you can't even find pictures of most of them. This is a rarity, just to find a picture of one. And because it says playingattheworld.com here with the watermark, that means that it's probably owned by this guy. I've talked about him before, that John Peterson, that wrote this book, Playing at the World, which you can't find anymore, this encyclopedia. So my guess is he must be one of the owners. But all of the other ones, it's very mysterious as to who owns them. If you can find one of these, any of the issues, you're talking thousands of dollars to pay to get one. If you want the first one, that you could, if you could even find one, I'm guessing it would be in the tens of thousands of dollars. That's how rare these are. So, anyway, so that was the Lake Geneva Tactical Studies Association, which later became TSR. Gary Gygax and those guys, that's who created this publication here. And then, in the early 70s, after TSR had been formed, and D&D had been released, the original D&D had been released. Now this I own one of. This is the Strategic Review. And this one was from autumn of 1975. And look at that, single copy, 50 cents. I just ordered this last week, and I was waiting. That's one of the reasons I didn't do this video yet. I was putting it off, was I was waiting for this to come in, because I wanted to be able to show it. But this is volume 1, number 3. So this is the third one ever done. And if I remember, there was also 13 of these done before it turned into the next thing. But basically, this was the TSR stuff. This little article right here is pretty comical because it's Gary Gygax kind of going off on a dude who gave them a bad review or something. Apparently, Gary was held a grudge because he openly berates the guy in here. So anyway, so this was the original publication of TSR once they became TSR. And then, that as we know, most of us know, some of us may not, some younger people may not, that actually turned into the Dragon magazine. Now this is the oldest one I have, number 43. I do not have any of the, if you can find issues 1, 2, 3, 4, I mean, they're hundreds of dollars each, and I'm not going to put that kind of money out to get those, but regardless, this is my oldest one, number 43. And if you notice, it has stuff about a game called Traveler in it. And Traveler wasn't even made by TSR. It was made by a different company. So the Dragon magazine meant to represent all gaming. They wanted to represent all role-playing and stuff like that. So early on, yeah, they covered everything. Didn't matter who made the game. They covered everything. Now, a little bit later, TSR created the RPGA, Role-Playing Games Association, which was the organized play club that you could join to go to special events that were exclusive to RPGA members, etc. I have my little card still. And that was, I think, started in 1980. And this is this is number 13. I have some older ones of this, but I wanted to show this one. This was there, if you were an RPGA member, you could order this. This was the Polyhedron. Or as a matter of fact, I think you got it automatically. It was every month or every other month. And this kind of shows, because they were really promoting all their different games with TSR, they had Dawn Patrol. This would be Dawn Patrol here. You had Metamorphosis Alpha over here, which was a science fiction game. You had Top Secret here, which was a spy one. Of course, you had Dungeons and Dragons here. And then you had Gamma World. This would be Gamma World here, which was post-apocalyptic. And then you had here, which was 1920s gangster stuff, which was called Gangbusters. I do have all of those games. So, I have all of those. So, but I like that cover because it was representative of the time. There's your RPGA logo right there. The RPGA network, it ran up until 5th edition. 5th edition, it changed to the Adventurers League. So all of you that play 5th edition that are in Adventurers League, this was what started it. The RPGA, Polyhedron magazine, right there. So, and then what they did was they started doing best of the Dragon magazines, and they did these compilation deals. Now, this very first one, this is the first edition of the best of the Dragon, and this one actually has stuff from the Strategic Review and the Dragons volumes 1 and 2. So if you were to find one of these, you could actually get some of the content from the old strategic reviews in there. So, and just to show you real quick, they made 5 editions of this, and then the last 3, as you can see, they went with the metallic colors. They went copper, silver, and then bronze. Then they started doing what they called annuals after that. After the Best of the Dragons, they started doing annuals, which I happen to have one right here. That was an annual. They started doing the best, instead of the best of, they just called it an annual. And I've got number 1, number 2, I've got most of them. So then that started happening. So sometime, I'm not sure when White Dwarf started, but this is called White Dwarf. This was in England. This was their kind of version of the Dragon magazine called White Dwarf. And you could get it in the States, but this was printed, I believe, in the UK. And it has, I only have a couple of these. And it has stuff for all different games, not just like Dungeons & Dragons, but all different gaming. So yeah, the role-playing games monthly, basically right there. So for all role-playing. So you had Dragon in the US, you had White Dwarf over in the UK. And then at some point, TSR decided, well, we're going to have a second magazine. We're going to come out with something called Dungeon. Now, Dungeon was, instead of, like Dragon was all articles about different games and so forth and so on, Dungeon was specifically adventures for, like, Dungeons and Dragons. Like, they were basically modules for the game. Now, this one also has some playing cards, which I was surprised to see that I still have all the playing cards in this one. So this issue right here might be worth something, because it's an original, and then it also still has all the trading cards. It has all these in there. So this is from 1992. So now we're up to 1992. And Dungeon ran for a while. And I do have another one to show off here of Dungeon, just because. This one I got on an auction. And the reason I got this one was a couple reasons. Number 1, it has a giant World of Greyhawk map inside. But if you look at the address label on here, and I'm not doxing anybody because Mr. Gygax has been gone for a long time, and this address here is very, very, very public. Everybody knows this address, so I'm not doxing anybody, but that is this was Gary Gygax's copy of this. Right there. I don't know if that'll show up for you at all. I wish it would, but it probably won't because of the glare. But anyway, you can take my word for it that this was Gary Gygax's magazine, and it was never even open. I mean, he never cracked it. And so I got it at an auction, and then they give you a certificate of authenticity and all that. So yeah, that's a prized possession of mine because it actually belonged to the man himself. So then later on, kind of round everything out to up to almost present day, they started doing these combo things. So you've got Dungeon on one side, and this would have been from, what's the date on here? This was, it doesn't say the date. Oh wait, there it is, 2002. So this is 2002, and they started doing these combo things where you got Dungeon on one side, and on the other side, you have Polyhedron. So you still had the RPGA right there in existence. And they were still doing the Polyhedron, but they did these a combo magazine. So that is kind of, and then to bring us to modern day, now you have, there's no more print stuff. However, let me move this stuff out of the way here because I got to get to something else. And the last thing that was in print was something that I worked on. And it was called Gygax Magazine. Right there. And the reason that I found out about, I just stumbled onto it one day, and I managed to get one somewhere. I don't remember where I got it. And I did a review of it. And then the owner of the company, Jason, he contacted me and said, hey, you want to come to work for us? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, I need some people to help publish this thing and everything. And you seem to be knowledgeable and all that. And I was like, sure. I'm like, if I can do it all remotely and everything. And he goes, oh yeah, you can help out and all that. So, the last two issues, 5 and 6, I was the project manager for TSR. The TSR at that time, that was TSR 2, because there's now been a couple of others. But we did 6 of these. Now, I wasn't part of it till 5 and 6, but as a total, they did 6 of them. And if you notice, they did the same artwork. They tried to use some of the same type of artwork from like Dragon Magazine did. And the funny part about this is the Gygax name. The Gygax brothers were part of this. Luke and Ernie were part of this. And then there was a big legal battle over the name, even though it's their name. And you can Google that if you want to, the whole legal battle over Gygax Magazine. But there were 6 issues. That's the second one. The second one I actually got signed by Jeff Easley right there. He's the one who did this piece right here. And so I got that one signed. And then number 3 here. And number 4, which was a third or fourth addition to the medieval chess series that was in the Dragon Magazine. Those started in Dragon Magazine, where they were doing on a chessboard type of a thing with magic and all that stuff. This is like the third or fourth one. And then number 5. Now, number 5, I worked on this one, but I was not credited on this one. Jason did not, and I give him crap about it. He forgot to put me and one other person in the credits. So, but I did make the credits for this one. So, number 6. So, this was the last one, and then of course the legal stuff. Basically put it to rest. So that was the last thing for tabletop role playing publications that I know of was Gygax Magazine. And now what you have is Dragon Plus, which is digital, which you can get through Wizards of the Coast. And those I think are free. I don't think you have to pay anything for those. I think you can just download them. They just because they pimp out their stuff on there, so that they don't charge for it. So as far as I know, everything's gone digital on the tabletop gaming stuff. I don't think there's anything in print anymore. But that gives you guys. I tried to do it as fast as I could because I don't want to make this too long of a video. It's already going to be a 2-parter, but that kind of gives you guys a real quick history of how it all started with publications, all the way up to Gygax Magazine, where, as far as I know, that ended it. And then you have Dragon Plus now digitally. So I hope that this was educational or informative or entertaining, whatever, a combination of all that, I hope. If there's anything that I missed, if there's somebody out there that has information that I don't have, feel free to correct me down below. I am far from perfect, and I did the best research that I could. The only guy that is the complete expert that I know of is the guy who wrote this. That guy. As far as I know, he's the only one that is like complete expert about all of it. So, I hope you guys found it entertaining and informative. So, I will try to do the part 2 of this tomorrow, and that'll be all on the video game side of magazines, gaming magazines. So, until then, and then when I do my next live, we'll talk about the crazy week that I just had leading up to trying to get this video done. So, anyway, thanks guys. We'll catch you on the flip side.